How is everybody doing today? Well, yes, today is a live stream, a tutorial on using spells. I'm going to try to cover as much material as I possibly can. I cannot cover everything, that would be impossible to do in a tutorial, but we'll try to cover the basics, and we'll see some applications of some of the spells that I used in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. So welcome to everybody. If you're not really familiar with my live streams before, I generally do unusual stuff. You don't usually see this sort of thing on YouTube. It's going to be one of those things that either will break me or make me stand out, I guess. Okay, so you will find the start time for this video. I will put that out later on once YouTube has published it, so you can be sure that I will actually do something like that. But as a general rule, I leave my live streams public, and they will go unlisted and they will get edited. So all of the Q&A or questions and answers will not be included in the edited version, for those of you who are sort of unaware of how I do things. I'm going to ask people that it's going to be important, since there's a lot of material to cover today, that you're going to have to use #question. Because that is really the only way I can actually see things. Otherwise, I can't really cover everything unless you sort of do something like that. I know there's going to be a lot of people in here today. So I'm going to pin that at the very top as my message, so that hopefully, please, there you go, it's there. Now, if you hit subscribe, the bell button and notifications, you should be able to access the live streams later on if you want to. I'm just putting up my camera now to make sure everything is working properly, so that's why you can see some miniatures and dice. But if you're a patron, you'll find that patrons, what I do with them is I always give them access to the live streams, even when they go unlisted, okay? All right, so sound is working all right. I'm going to be moving around a little bit, so the sound will be, it won't be consistent right throughout the entire presentation, because I actually have to do stuff, okay? And because I'm doing stuff, I cannot make it consistent. It just isn't possible. I'm going to say hi to a couple of people, and for those of you who are unaware, this is probably going to take a little bit of time because I'm covering a lot of material. So my suggestion is grab some drink, some water, or whatever you like in terms of a beverage or liquid, and some food, and get comfortable, and we're going to get into this in a few seconds. I just want to say hi to a few people before we get started. Hi Sam Tom Miller, how's it going? We've got Quinton's here, hello. Osbor, hello. Danny Studios, hi, nice to see you. Overboard DM, who has a YouTube channel, hi Joe, how's it going? Fender is here, hello. Now, I have done videos like this before, and as a general rule in the past, those sorts of videos usually consist of a presentation, and then I open it up to questions and answers. I will be looking at the live stream chat as I go, so if I do spot from time to time as I'm transitioning from one spell or role that we cover, then I might bring up that question, but there's no guarantee. That's really how you're going to be, if you want that to be actually answered, the best way to do that is #question and then the question, okay? And then near the end, when I'm finished, then we can open it up and we'll see how we go. All right. Okay, so let's get started, because that's what you're here for something other than me just chatting about how I do my live streams. I'm actually giving people time to get in the room. That's part of the reason. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And we're not going to deal with control weather, because the weather here in New Zealand is fine. I'm not worried about that at all. No, the topic for today is, this is a Dungeons & Dragons 5e spell tutorial. And what sort of stuff, what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover the basics of casting spells. So that's a spell attack, that's the melee and the range. We're going to cover saving throws. I'm going to give you some examples. I've selected 6 spells to demonstrate today. They are all low-level spells, so therefore they're usually going to be spells you would use rather than something you will hardly ever use, okay? And they're easy to demonstrate, which is why I've selected them. I'm also going to cover another aspect to those spells, and that is when's like the right time to use that spell. You know, when is a good time to apply it to your game, depending on the monster you're dealing with. And I would always recommend, before doing anything like that, is to make sure you ask your monster, can I make a monster knowledge check, so you can figure out what's going on. Now, to make things easy for myself, what I'm going to do is, in the starter set, the Dungeons & Dragons 5e starter set, there are pre-made characters, and there's a wizard. I'm using the pre-made wizard at level 1 for all of my calculations, okay? Everything that I use is from that particular wizard. The only difference is I have expanded the wizard's spell list for the purposes of this demonstration. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, okay? Otherwise, it definitely wouldn't work. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with some of the basics around spellcasting. Probably, I would say, my favorite part of the game, certainly the most difficult to understand, totally understand when people get confused. I would if I was dealing with Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Yes, I am aware it is not as hard as some of the other versions, but that's beside the point. Okay, so let's start off with the first aspect to spellcasting, and that is the spell attack. There are two types. There is the range and there is the melee. Now, I'm just going to go spell attack here. So how do we calculate that? It's actually exactly the same whether you're up close or you're at range, okay? The calculation is the same. And the calculation in this case is really simple. It's your spellcasting modifier. For the wizard that I'm using, their spellcasting modifier is a +3. And I'm going to add that to their proficiency bonus, which is a +2 because they're level 1. So that means we're dealing with a 2 for proficiency and a 3 for the spellcasting modifier, not the score. The score for the wizard is different, okay? It's the modifier, the smaller number beside intelligence that you would use. If you're using something like a druid, then you would use wisdom. If you're using something like a sorcerer, then you're going to use charisma, okay? It's the spell casting ability score and modifier that relates to that particular class. And because I'm using a wizard, we use intelligence. So 2 + 3 equals, obviously, 5. That means that is the number I will add to a 20-sided dice roll every time I make an attack. Every time I make an attack, that's the number I add. Okay, so that's the first part. Nice and easy, easy peasy stuff. What about if we want to make a saving throw? Now that's a slightly different calculation, but it's the same calculation no matter what sort of spellcasting class you select. Okay, so saving throw, and I'll make sure if I can get enough space in here. Saving throw. There are, throw. What was I trying to do there? There are 3 numbers involved, okay? We take the number 8. Don't ask me why the number 8. That is what the designers have decided in terms of the calculation. So the number 8 is the first number that we use for determining the saving throw DC for our spellcaster. And then we're going to add, just like our spell attack, we're going to add the proficiency bonus. So at level 1, that is a 2. So we add 2. You're getting a theme here, right? Now that we've added that, we're going to add one other number, and that would be the spellcaster's ability modifier, not the score. It's the smaller number. For the wizard, it's a +3, so we're adding 3. So that's 8, 2, and 3 comes to 13. So every time a creature, monster, or enemy has to make a saving throw against our wizard, who is right over here in the back line, they're going to have to get at least a 13, otherwise they will fail that particular saving throw. And of course there are different effects based on a saving throw. Sometimes some spells have no effect if you save and are successful. Others, even if you save, you still take half damage, but we're not going to go into that. Now there's another mechanic to Dungeons & Dragons spellcasting that confuses people, and I still find it hugely confusing myself, but we'll cover it as well. And you might have remember somebody mentioned something about concentration. Concentration only applies to a spell that is stipulated as a concentration spell. Okay, so if it doesn't say it's concentration, don't need to worry about it. But if it does say concentration, and it usually has a longer duration, then you would have to actually calculate what you need to roll. Now, who actually makes that concentration check? It's a constitution check. It is made by the person who is casting the spell. It is usually done when the spellcaster has got a spell that's concentration and somebody does damage, like a rock gets hurled by this hill giant over here and it hits our wizard. What do we do? Concentration. So, concentration. Gosh, my pen is quite big. Okay, so there's one number we start with. The DC that the wizard has to get on their constitution check is a 10. But there's an amendment to that. And the reason there's an amendment is because sometimes a monster will do more damage than what is kind of expected. And therefore we're going to take the damage that the rock does. So the rock gets hurled from our hill giant over here. We're going to assume it already hits. So I'm not going to make an attack roll. I'm just going to assume it hit our wizard, and it's going to do some damage. And so what we're going to do is we're going to roll some damage, see how much damage that is, and we're going to halve that. So a hill giant with a rock does 3d10 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. The average damage is 21. This is what is listed in the stat block for the hill giant. Okay, so if we take the average damage, which is 21, here we go, halve that. We're going to round down because we can't really have a percentage. Okay, because it would be 10.5, that's just not going to work. So forget about the 10.5 and just take the 10. So in this case, the two numbers are identical. Because they're identical, you can use either one. Okay, when you're doing this, whichever number is the highest number is the number that you're going to use. So if we were to roll some dice, and I have to be very lucky because I can imagine rolling 3 of these dice and actually getting the number I want is probably not going to happen today, but we'll try to do it anyway. So taking our hill giant, now our hill giant, as I said, with the rock, when it gets hurled, it does 3d10 plus 5. So we find some d10s somewhere along here. There's a d10, there's one. We'll find another one somewhere. Yep, there's another d10. And if I'm really lucky in my little stockpile here, I'll find another d10 and we won't have to sort of freak out too much. Okay, so those are the numbers we have. We're going to roll those. We're going to add them together and we're going to add plus 5 because that's what the stat box said. Okay, we'll move these out of the way. So we're starting with 5. We're going to add 3 more numbers to that. Pick these up. And I'll put that here. It's a little bit easier. And we'll roll them. Okay, so hopefully I rolled more than average. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. So I got a 5 on one dice. I got a 4 on another. And I got a 7. Thank you, dice gods. So you made life a little bit easier for me. So we're going to add that up and see what it comes to. So 5 and 5 is 10. 14. And the last number gives us 21. So it's pretty much an average roll, okay? So it would be exactly the same calculation as before. We're going to halve the 21, and it winds up getting rounded down, and it would be a 10. So often you don't need to worry too much about the amount of damage a monster does, but if it does like a critical, that can be problematic because you're doubling the dice that you're rolling. Instead of rolling 3 of these, I'd be rolling 6 of them, and that would be significantly more difficult for a wizard to try to actually be successful on a concentration check. All right, I think we've covered concentration. If I need to cover it more, you will let me know, and we will do that, okay? So let's get on to the first of our mini spells we have to cover today. And I want to just ditch that. I'm going to grab my little brown dice here, and we're going to start off with what I think is probably the more fun. I like fire, okay? For those of you who don't know, I like things that, that cause fire damage. It is one of those damage types that tend to be resistant. You know, monsters tend to be resistant to it. So we're going to ditch him. I'm going to bring in a a troll, because trolls have regeneration. The thing about a troll with regeneration is you have to do fire damage to stop that regeneration working. So here, hence, Firebolt is a really good spell in this situation. So let's go Firebolt, Firebolt, and we'll turn that way. And I do actually have a little stat block for our troll, which I will put over here. Their AC is not huge, it's only an AC of 15. Okay, so that's what we would have to actually roll to hit the target. So AC equals 15. We have to get 15 or more to strike the target. I want to go over the spell very, very, very briefly. So the spell is one action to cast. It has a range of 120 feet. It has a verbal, so you have to speak some words, and a somatic component, which means there's a gesture involved. And the duration is instantaneous, so it happens straight away. So you hurl a mot of fire at a creature or object within range. And it has a long range, so we're not going to have any problem. Each of these squares represents 5 feet, so that's not going to be a problem. It's only about 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 feet away. You make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 1d10 fire damage, and flammable objects hit by the spell ignite if it isn't worn or carried by some sort of creature or monster or whatever. Okay, so it's really good for setting things alight, but it can't set everything alight. For those of you who are thinking, oh, I can set alight the bag that monster's carrying. No, you can't really do that, but you can certainly target the monster. That's not a problem. Now, the spell does scale up with time. I do have a video already on Firebolt for those of you who are unsure how the spell works, but we're going to cover it anyway. So we need to make a spell attack. Now, remember I said the spell attack for this wizard, which is over here, is a 5. So we go 5. And we don't want that dice there. Now, normally I would roll both dice at the same time to save time. It just saves time rolling both dice. But because we're sort of breaking it up, this is the attack side. We are targeting our troll. Now, if you're worried about cover, so if, say, for example, you've got something in front of you that's quite big, just move so you've got a clear line of sight. Okay? That's often one of the things that trips people up is line of sight with attack rolls. And even a spell attack at range can be problematic. So you still got to deal with cover. So that's a clear shot. Okay, we don't have to worry about anything now. So roll your dice. 20-sided dice. I rolled a 12. So we take that 12. And we have 5 plus 12 comes to a 17. So 17 is greater than or equal to the armor class of our troll, which only has an armor class of 15. So we are successful. We hit the target. That means we get to do some damage. Now, what's the damage at level 1? It's only one of these. Now, I know people will ask me, do I add my proficiency bonus to damage? Do I add my spellcasting modifier to the damage as well? No, it's a cantrip. It's a very, very basic spell. Firebolt is not really designed for you to be able to use your spellcasting modifier. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So I've got a 10-sided dice. I'm going to roll that. Whatever I roll on the dice, that's how much damage I do. So I rolled a 9. I don't know if you can necessarily see that. So I do 9 fire damage. Okay. And the troll, fortunately, will take all of that because it's not resistant to fire, and it will stop it regenerating during that round, which is hugely useful. Some of the applications and problems of Firebolt, try not to use Firebolt against something that you think might be resistant or immune to fire. It's not really a good idea. It's a good all-round spell. It's got a good range. It does a significant amount of damage for a cantrip, really. So it's not the best damage, but it's all right. And you can ignite stuff. That's probably the biggest aspect to Firebolt, is you can actually set things alight. Can be really useful when you need to create a bit of a distraction or chaos while other people are trying to escape. Because escaping, as you may have already discovered in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, is very hard to do. So make it a bit easier for yourself and start a fire. Okay, so the next one I want to cover is a bit of a favourite too. I know a lot of people really love this spell. I'm not really hugely interested in this spell myself. I don't use it a lot. It's one of those things that I think other people have attributed too much usefulness to, when in fact it is very situational, and that is Ray of Frost. So we'll get rid of this, and we're going to write down Ray of Frost. Ray of Frost for you is yet again one of those spells that use a spell attack. So Ray of Frost, and we're going to target a different type of creature. So we'll get rid of the troll. Bye-bye, troll. Thank you for your help. I do appreciate your time, but we are going to grab somebody else. We're going to grab what is called an Etten. It's like a two-headed giant-like creature. Okay, there's an Etten. Now, for those of you who are into spellcasting, can I just make it really clear, it's always a good idea to have meat shields in front, somebody who can block, so you don't have to worry about monsters running up to you and then smacking you, because you probably won't survive that. So an Etten has an armor class of only 12, so the armor class is very, very low. That tends to be the case with most monsters. And we're going to go over the spell very briefly, and then I will actually demonstrate how you're going to use this in this situation. So Ray of Frost has a casting time of 1 action. It has a range of 60 feet, so that's not a huge range, but it should be enough to get what you need done. It has verbal components, so that means you speak words. It has a somatic component, so you have a gesture to it. The duration is instantaneous, and you fire a frigid beam of white blue light that streaks towards a creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, it takes 1d8 cold damage, and its speed is reduced by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. That's the caster. Okay, so hugely useful if you get it working the way you want it to. So let's go through the process of making attack. You should have figured it out by now. Spell attack is the 5. We're going to roll a 20-sided dice, just like we did before. Make sure you line yourself up, so make sure you're not standing behind somebody who's going to block your line of sight or provide cover. Usually with larger creatures, that's not so much a big problem, because you're usually medium size, and so then cover rules work slightly differently. So, but I've got a clear line here, and I can move back and forth if I want to, and I can find cover, and I can position myself where I am in a better place so that things can't target me. I can even take my shot from here and then move behind the well if I wanted to. Okay, so let's roll that 20-sided dice. We don't want that one. That's not the right dice. Okay, so I rolled a 12. Oh, I'm going to roll 12s all night. I suppose that's better than 1s and 2s. So 12. You can already see what's going to happen. So 5 plus 12 is 17. So 17 is equal to or greater than the armor class of the Etten. So we're going to hit the target with our Ray of Frost. So what does it do? It's going to do some damage. What's that damage? Remember, I said it was a 8-sided dice. At level 1, it's only one 8-sided dice. It does scale up, so as you use it at higher levels, like level 5, you get 2 of these. And at level 11, you're going to get 3. And at level 17, you'll get 4 8-sided dice to roll. There is no modifier added to this. It's just the dice, nothing else. For those of you who are thinking you're ever going to get to level 17, I mean, most people don't even play past level 10. So level 10, 11, 12, that tends to be where people are playing at. Okay, so let's do some damage. So all we do is we pick up the dice, 8-sided dice, we roll the dice. I rolled a 6. That's how much damage we do. Okay, so 6 cold. It means it is possible to just do 1 point of damage. For those of you who are wondering, it definitely can happen. It's a bit unfortunate, but it does happen. Okay, so I'm going to take this card away for a second, and I just want to talk to you about what's going to happen. Once you've had your turn as the wizard, you can maneuver yourself into a better position, provided you get enough movement. Each of these squares is 5 feet, so if I was here, I can go 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, move behind there and I'm fine. This slows down the movement of an Etten. Now, the Etten has a speed of 40 feet. And when you're slowing down a creature that's already quite fast, it's almost pointless. Because, as you can see, because of the distance that it's dealing with, 5, 10, 15, 20, it's already up in the face in the meat shields. So the best time to have used something like this is when it was further back. So let's bring it back a little bit and see what sort of distance we need before it becomes kind of useful to us. So we'll go backwards, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. This thing's big enough, can probably step over that wall. 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Okay, so if we're at 40 feet, roughly, and we slow it down, and it would still be in range. So using Ray of Frost at extreme range is a good idea, provided there's nobody in the way, providing cover and stuff like that. And with big creatures, not so much of a big deal. But slowing it down by 10 feet, instead of 40 feet of movement, it would have 30 feet. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Now you might classify the wall as difficult terrain for the creature, but you might decide that it's actually got such a large step that it doesn't need to worry about it. Okay, so it's actually better to use something like Ray of Frost when the creature is actually relatively slow, they're a long distance away, or you are sort of desperate to try to escape, and the only way you can think of is to actually cast this so that you have a better chance of escape. So at long range it's better. Try to cast it on a creature that doesn't already have a very fast speed, and try not to use it when it's already too close, because once it's already about 30 feet away, it's probably going to get to you anyway. The idea is you want to force it to actually dash. If it can get the creature to dash, it can't make an attack that round. And that's often what people use Ray of Frost for. And that's Ray of Frost and how you would use it in your game. Okay, let's pick a different monster and another spell that we can cast here. Something that is a little bit more, I guess, a lot of people when they talk about Ray of Frost, it's one of those spells I've always found that requires a lot of forethought, and in conjunction with something else it can work well. But there's another spell which is surprisingly useful. I'm going to move our wizard back over here, and I'm going to pull out an owlbear for today. I think an owlbear seems like a reasonable option, so we'll get rid of that. And where's my owlbear? There's an owlbear. We'll bring the owlbear in, okay? And we'll rub off this. We're going to use Chill Touch. Chill Touch is surprisingly a very good spell. A lot of people don't realize just how useful this thing can be, and I'm actually quite surprised how little people pick up this spell. Its range is pretty good, it does a reasonable amount of damage, and it has a whole lot of additional effects that are quite useful in the right situation. So let's go Chill Touch. Chill Touch. And we need the armor class. I'm pretty sure we need the armor class because I'm almost completely sure that this is a ranged spell attack. Okay, so we're not making a saving throw. So we're going to look at the armor class of our monster, and it's a 13. So AC equals 13 for an owlbear. Remember, we're using our wizard. That's a +5 for the spell attack, and we're going to roll a 20-sided dice again. There's a lot of repetition, I'm aware, but we'll go over it until you guys have got it sorted out. So I rolled a 15. Oh, okay, we get a different number. No more 12s, maybe. Okay, so 15. 5 plus 15 is 20. Okay, cool. So we've hit the target. But let's actually have a look at that spell, because as I said, there's a lot of different effects going on with Chill Touch that a lot of people don't realize, and in the right situation it works really well. So it's got a casting time of 1 action. It's got a range of 120 feet, which is pretty much the longest range you're going to get with any cantrip. So it's a really good cantrip to have. It's got a verbal component, so you speak words, a somatic component, so there's a gesture, and the duration is 1 round. Now you'll notice I didn't say instantaneous. It says 1 round. That doesn't mean just your turn. That means everybody's turn in that round. And here is the reason why. you create a ghostly skeletal hand in a space or in the space of a creature within range. Okay, so what is basically happening is there's a skeletal hand that is appearing. I'm going to use a dice to represent this right there. That 4-sided dice, that's our skeletal hand. Okay, you make a ranged spell attack against the creature to assail it with a chill of the grave. Okay, so we did our spell attack. On a hit, the target takes 1d8 necrotic damage. So we need a 8-sided dice to do the damage, so we'll get that out of the way. And it can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn. This is why the spell is duration of 1 round. That means if you target a creature that has healing potions, they won't be able to benefit from the healing potion. If they have healing spells, they can't use those healing spells on them and regenerate hit points, because Chill Touch stops that. Now, although it's really useful to use it, I guess, against any creature that might be able to use spells and potions, can you imagine if we go back to our troll? Sorry, troll, you got the hard work today. If we go back to our troll, remember, trolls regenerate at the beginning of their turn, and they regenerate 10 hit points every time. So if you were to cast Chill Touch on it, it can't regenerate. So this is why, I mean, fire would do the same thing, it can't regenerate, but Chill Touch can do that as well. Okay, so that's why it's really useful for anything that tries to regenerate. So let's go back to our owlbear, because we're going to pick on the owlbear. I like picking on owlbears. It's a fun monster. Okay, all right, so there's our owlbear. Now there's a couple of other things that are going on here, and I want to just go over them, and then I will explain what's going on with that, okay? Until then, the hand clings to the target. So the hand clinging to the target represents it staying there for 1 round. If you hit an undead target, it also has disadvantage on attack rolls against you until the end of your next turn. So that's very important. That means that when you're dealing with undead creatures, it changes the ball game again. All right. So let's deal with our owlbear. I'm going to take that dice. I'm going to roll it. Pardon me. And I got an 8. So that's good news. So owlbears are not resistant to necrotic damage. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that being a problem. Necrotic damage is something that is usually you're going to get resistance from undead with, when it comes to necrotic damage sometimes. So that can be problematic. Necrotic. I think I've got that right. Okay. So there are some pluses and some minuses to doing that. So the creature now takes 8 necrotic damage, and you remove that from their hit points. Okay. So it's a good spell. It's got lots of range. It stops people healing, or creatures healing, or whoever it is you're targeting. But if we were dealing with a target like a zombie, I want to talk about what happens with a zombie, because zombies are a little bit interesting about what goes on there. Frankly, because they've got a really, really low armor class. Really low. You'd be surprised just how low. So if we had a bunch of zombies over here, and we rub out all this stuff, and we redo our calculation, which we will, and you'll see what I mean when we do this. It's quite entertaining. The armor class of a zombie is 8. Now, not all undead have an armor class of 8, obviously, but a zombie, pretty easy to hit. No matter what, it doesn't really matter what you're hitting it with. So that's 8. Okay, that's its armor class. So we'll make our attack roll again with our Chill Touch. So we can move into position, fire off our spell, target whichever one you want. It doesn't really matter. You decide. They're about the same distance apart. They're going to get there at some point. Okay, so what do we got? We got a 12. So we add 12 to our 5. I'm rolling a lot of 12s today. So we get 17. So 17 is definitely greater than or equal to the armor class of a zombie. So the zombie that we hit is hit. And it's going to take some damage, necrotic damage. So we're going to roll that. And okay, I rolled a 7. So 7 necrotic. I don't want to put down the whole word, but I'll just put N for now. So you've got the idea. Now, when it comes to what sort of damage types are zombies actually immune to? They're immune to poison, but not necrotic. So therefore, you don't have to worry about it. but there are undead creatures that are resistant or immune to necrotic damage, so you've got to be aware of that. Now that we've hit the target, it's done its damage. It can't regenerate, but when we get round to the zombies getting up close and they get to make their attacks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they move pretty slow. They're only 20 feet, okay? 5, 10, 15, 20. So this one, let's say, I'll just forget about him for now. So sorry about that. So one zombie gets up there, they move their 20 feet, and they make their attack. And instead of getting to make their attack as they would normally do with rolling one 20-sided dice and adding, in this case, their attack modifier is not that huge, okay? It's pretty poor actually, it's only a +3. Instead of rolling one dice, they have to roll 2 dice because chill touch lasts for a round, and it would still be in effect once it moves up to you, your fellow colleagues, and it would get to make an attack at disadvantage. Now, I've covered disadvantage in the past. You roll 2 dice, and you have to take the lowest result. So instead of getting to take the 12, I get to take the 10. 10 plus 3 is 13. It significantly improves the chance that they can't actually do any damage. Now, zombies don't really do a lot of damage anyway, so it's not a big deal. But you can apply that to a lot of different creatures, not just a zombie, okay? Hence, quite useful to get disadvantage from an undead creature. Alright, so let's get rid of the zombies. We've covered Chill Touch. Now, when's the best time to use Chill Touch? Well, Chill Touch really works best, as you can see, to stop regeneration from trolls and anything else that regenerates, but also to deal with undead because of the disadvantage that they wind up having to deal with. Alright, let's ditch that. We don't need that there. And I'm moving my way through. Okay, so let's pick another creature and a different spell. Ooh, we've covered at least 3 so far. Poison Spray. Poison Spray is a spell that actually I don't use that much. I feel bad about that, and it's probably because Poison Spray is one of those spells that actually requires a bit of skill and forethought, and you've really got to wait until they're very close because its range is very, very short. It's not as long as some of the other spells, okay? Therefore, not so useful all the time, but in the right situation can be useful. So Poison Spray. Okay, there's Poison Spray. Now, let's just go over the spell very quickly. And I want to bring in this creature. This is a Akeg, and there's the little card for it. So how does Poison Spray work? Basically, with Poison Spray, it's a casting time of 1 action. It has a range of 10 feet. You can see that's only 2 squares on the grid. It's got to be very close. It has a verbal component, so you speak a few words, a somatic component, so there's a gesture to it. Its duration is instantaneous, so it happens straight away. You extend your hand towards a target you can see within range and project a puff of noxious gas from your palm. The creature must succeed on a Constitution throw or saving throw or take 1d12 poison damage. So it does a lot of damage, but you have to get really close. And that's where the problem lies with this spell, is you have to get really close, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate this. Remember, the DC the creature has to get is a 13, because we calculated that for their wizard. That's the DC they need to get. And instead of the wizard doing the dice roll, the monster is going to be doing the dice roll. So your wizard doesn't have to do very much. You sit back and let your dungeon master do all the hard work this time. They have to pick up the dice, throw them, and hopefully be successful. Otherwise, bad things will happen. So what is the actual Constitution saving throw for an Akeg? So the first thing you'll notice is there's no saving throw on the stat block. So what you want to look for is the Constitution score, and then there should be a modifier. Now the modifier for the Akeg is a +1. So that means all we're doing is rolling a 20-sided dice and adding plus 1. So that's pretty easy calculation. So 1 plus whatever we roll on the dice, and we'll do that now. I rolled a 14. Okay, so 14 plus 1 is 15. So I have to get equal to or greater than the DC of 13, which I did. So that means that that creature takes no damage. Okay, they are successful. They don't have to worry about it. Really, really useful. What if I rolled lower? Because we want to do some damage as well, right? Need a demonstration where there's actually some dice rolling for damage as well. So I rolled the 3 this time to make an attack. Now the thing is, I can't target it unless it's close enough. So back here it wouldn't have worked. It has to get right up in your face, and that's still not close enough. Okay, you see where the wizard is? 5. That's 15 feet away. I actually have to be here. That means it's really important to either be behind somebody and then move out and around. Any kind of creature that has a range to them, in other words, has a range of greater than 5 feet, is a problem for poison spray because you have to get so close. Okay, but if you've got a little gap and you've got your fellow adventurers blocking, then you can shoot between. Now I can target it here, but I can't target it here. Couldn't target it over there. Okay, so you have to be really, really close for it to be effective. So this time it failed. Okay, because I rolled a 3, add 1, comes to 4. That's a big, that didn't work out well at all. So how much damage do we do? Well, as it happens, it's a big dice. It's the big one. You very rarely get to roll this thing, and this is one of those spells where you do. Now it scales up. As you get higher in level, you will get more dice that you can roll at level 5, level 11, and level 17. So we're only dealing with a level 1 wizard. So I rolled 12. Sweet. How much is that? That's 12. We don't add any modifier. Okay, it's a cantrip. It's only 12. And what sort of damage is it? It's poison. I don't really quite understand the nature of poison, because I would have thought that when you do poison damage, you would also wind up with the poison condition. But that does not necessarily mean that it's going to happen in the game of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Some things can do poison damage and not impart the poison condition. Please do not get upset with me. It's the designers. I personally don't think it makes any sense either. Okay, don't give your dungeon master a hard time. It does 12 poison damage. So this particular creature is not resistant to poison damage, which is fine. It's going to take all of that, and you've hit your target. So when's the best time to use something like poison spray? It really requires a smart player. As you can see, you've got to be very close. You've got to have a meat shield in front of you. You may find that you're dealing with, in some cases, you might find that you're dealing with cover, and something like this spell, which is a Constitution saving throw, it really isn't going to be affected by cover. So you don't need to worry about somebody standing in front of you when you cast the spell. Okay, you can do that. It's only going to be the dexterity saving throws that are affected by cover. Okay, and yes, your fellow allies can provide cover to a monster, so you just need to be aware of that. The other thing with poison spray is, frankly, I find that it is too hard to use on a regular basis. I've seen it used in my games before, and it's done bucket loads of damage. It's been really useful when it could be used, but it's really come up because you have to be so close, and most battles take place at a range of anywhere from 100 feet to 60 feet away, so you're going to be using some other sort of spell before you ever get to poison spray, and the idea is to knock out and take out the creatures before they ever get close enough to do any kind of damage. So therefore, it's not a hugely useful spell, but it does a lot of damage. Okay, I know somebody's going to disagree with me. There's going to be somebody who's going to get upset about me dissing on poison spray, but it's very situational. You've got to be very close. And do not use poison spray on anything that might have poison resistance or immunity. That would be a bad thing. Okay, right, let's get rid of that dice. Let's move on to the next spell. I've done Poison Spray. I want to cover another spell. This spell is, oh, gosh, I don't even know if I would even consider it something that I've even seen anybody use successfully. It just doesn't come up that often, and that's Acid Splash. A lot of these spells I have already done videos on, so if you haven't seen them, you can go and check them out, and they are a lot shorter, but they don't cover everything in a huge amount of detail. Now, Acid Splash is one of those things where when you use it, you want to target something that is got like a high armor class. It's a good time to use it, and a low dexterity, because it can actually be effective. So let's get rid of you. That thing isn't going to be the thing we want to target today. Now, what we want to target is something that's a pain in the butt, and these things are a pain. And a good time to use them is when they're right next to each other. This is when you want to use Acid Splash, okay? Otherwise, it's not going to work out very well for you. You want the creatures to be close enough that you can actually affect both of them. Otherwise, you're only targeting one creature, and this thing doesn't do a lot of damage. And this is called a boulette. It's the land shark. This thing burrows under the ground and does all sorts of horrible things. And it's like a tank. So they're really hard to hurt. So let's cover Acid Splash. It's a casting time of 1 action. It has a range of 60 feet. It has a verbal component which you speak some words, a somatic component where you perform a gesture, and it's instantaneous, so it happens straight away. So you hurl a bubble of acid. Choose one creature within range. So we pick only one of these creatures to target, okay? Or choose 2 creatures within range. So now we can target 2 creatures within range, but they must be within 5 feet of each other. 5 feet. Pretty much they need to be standing right next to each other. Okay? 5 feet. That's it. Right next to each other. You do not want them to have too much distance between them. That would be too far away. Okay? They have to be really close. This is why this spell often does not get used by anybody. So the target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 acid damage. Alright, so acid is what we're doing today. It's only a 6-sided dice, so it's not a lot. The spell does scale up as you level up, so at level 5 you get more dice, and at level 11 and level 17, not that you're ever going to get to level 17 more than likely. Okay, so what is our DC for our wizard? Our wizard has a DC of 13. Remember, we calculated that. DC is 13. So we need to figure out what the dexterity saving throw is for the boulette. We're definitely within range. Now, remember, your party members can provide cover in the right circumstances. So it's easy enough to step to the side, so you've got a clear shot, and then step back again. Okay? And you should be doing that. You're a wizard. If you shoot stuff, step out from behind cover and then step back again. It's always useful. Even your fellow allies provide cover. So use it when you can. So the dexterity saving throw for a boulette. Let's have a look. Well, it's not very high. Fortunately for us, it's only a 0. That's right. It's 0. That's the modifier that we get. So 0 plus whatever I roll on the 20-sided dice. That's what we're going to do for today. Our boulette is in trouble. So step out, hurl it here. It's within range. You've got 60 feet. You can use it further back if you wanted to, provided there isn't too much cover involved. And we roll our dice. I rolled a 20. Okay. Now I know people are going to say, okay, so what happens when I roll a 20 on a saving throw? Does that mean it's an automatic success? No. Automatic success only applies to attack rolls. It can be a spell attack, it can be a melee attack, it can be a ranged attack, it can be a weapon attack, unarmed attack, that's fine, but it does not apply to a saving throw or a skill check. Okay, so we get 20. So that means that our monster got pretty good. It got a 20. It got greater than or equal to the DC of 13. So, unfortunately, Acid Splash does no damage whatsoever. Nothing at all. What if I were to roll that again? Let's roll that again and see if we can actually hurt this thing. Because this thing's got an armor class of 17, so it's got a really high armor class for a monster. I rolled another 20. Oh, is this how it's going to be tonight? Are we going to have 20s rolled from now on? First I started off with 12s. 3, that's better. Okay, so let's give you an example when the monster actually rolls low enough to actually do anything to it. So 0 plus 3 is 3. Okay, it failed. So it's got to take some damage. How much damage is that? It's a level 1 character. We're only going to be rolling a 6-sided dice. No modifiers, no ability scores, no proficiency bonuses. Don't add any of that to the damage. Roll my 6-sided dice. That's all I do. So you can see, with something like Acid Splash, it's not a lot of damage. 3 damage. Acid. The monster, fortunately, is not resistant or immune to acid damage. So it's going to take all of that damage. But the thing is, and the great part about it is, that even though I only rolled a 3, I can affect both of these creatures. So if both bullets take 3 damage, this one takes 3 damage, and because it's so close, the other one also takes 3 damage. Okay? So hence, a really good spell to use. All right. In the right circumstance. As I said, really only useful against low dexterity monsters who are standing in a cluster. If they cluster up, then you can use it. All right, so let's get rid of that because I think we've covered Acid Splash sufficiently. And I believe I have one more spell I want to cover tonight that I specifically have programmed into my presentation. I'm going to get rid of the bullets because the bullets are no use to me anymore. And I'm going to cover the last one. The last one I want to cover is a little bit of a contentious spell. And it's Shocking Grasp. Why is Shocking Grasp contentious? The reason I find it really not that useful is that something like Shocking Grasp requires you to be extremely close, okay? Like right up in the face of something. And that's where I have an issue with this particular one. So I'm going to pick an ogre. That's right, I have an ogre. There's my ogre. The ogre is coming for them. It's going to be bad. And why would we even need to worry about something like Shocking Grasp? Because if you're smart and you're a wizard, you're at the back, staying out of reach of anybody who can do any significant damage to you, right? So this is Shocking Grasp. It's a casting time of 1 action. It has a range of touch, so you have to be right next to it to touch it. Okay? It has components verbal, so you speak few words. It has a somatic component, so you perform a gesture. It has a duration of instantaneous, so it happens straight away. And this is what it does. Lightning springs from your hand to deliver a shock to a creature you try to touch. Make a melee spell attack against the target. You have advantage on the attack roll if the target is wearing armor made of metal. Well, this creature is not wearing metal, so you will not have advantage. On a hit, the target takes 1d8 lightning damage. It's a 8-sided dice. And it can't take reactions until the start of its next turn. It does scale up. So at level 5, you'll get 2 of these 8-sided dice, and at level 11, you'll get 3, and at level 17, if you ever get there, you're going to get 4. Okay? So that's nice, I guess, but most cantrips do scale when they're doing damage. So let's have a look at this situation, how this might be applied. I want to move this card over here for now, and I want to demonstrate just what's going on here, and you'll see what I mean with regard to why it's a problematic spell. So Shocking Grasp, and yes, I have already done a spell video on this, so if you do want to check out the shorter version, you can, but I am going to go into some of the more detailed aspects of this particular spell. Now, it's a melee spell attack, so that means that our wizard has a 5 for their spell attack. We're using that number. It means we're going up against armor class, and ogre has a very low armor class, so it's an armor class of 11. So there we go. Lovely. Isn't that wonderful? We've got that all figured out. We'll just push that over there so you can have a better view of what's going on. So how does this work? So here is our situation. Maybe our ogre's further away. Well, you can't use it unless you're close enough. So maybe the ogre gets closer, up here, for whatever reason. How would you use this? Now, this is one of those creatures that fortunately has only got a reach of 5 feet, which is good for some spells, but I'll show you where the problem lies. When it's your turn, and while the meat shields are holding back the ogre, you're going to use Shocking Grasp. The only way to do that is to get close enough to it. Yes, you could apply Shocking Grasp through a familiar. If you have a familiar, you could cast it through that, and you do that with an owl because it has flyby. Okay, if you use flyby, you don't have to worry about provoking attacks of opportunity. Otherwise, that familiar is going to get absolutely destroyed. It will not survive. It will get trounced. So if you don't have a familiar and you want to cast a spell, you have to move up to the creature to cast it. Can you see the problem with doing that with a wizard who has like very few hit points and a very low armor class? Okay, they're squishy. Now you roll your 20-sided dice and you pray that you get the number you want. I rolled a 12. Lucky for you. Okay, so I get a 12. We add that to 5, that's 17. So that's successful. We hit the target. Yippee skippies. All right, we're going to do some damage, lightning damage. So we get rid of this dice. We didn't have advantage because no armor being worn. And it's an 8-sided dice for lightning. And we rolled a 4. Okay, so that's how much damage our ogre takes. 4 lightning. There we go. 4 lightning. And ogres aren't resistant or immune to lightning damage. Now, you can now move away without having to use your action, because you don't have an action left, to disengage without provoking an attack of opportunity. You don't have to worry about that because you hit the target. If you didn't hit the target, you would be in trouble. Okay? You can now move away and it can't attack you. Okay? That's the benefit of using something like Shocking Grasp. But you have to hit the target. If you don't hit the target, it's a problem. And that's where I have issues with this spell. Because now I can move away because I did hit the target. What if I hadn't have hit the target and I had moved forward? That means I'm right in the line. An ogre has a choice between armored cleric and low armored barbarian or fighter, or the squishy looking, small, puny looking wizard. Kill the wizard first. Yeah. So Shocking Grasp is not the sort of spell you use to move forward and attack with. The only time that Shocking Grasp is potentially useful is when you're dealing with somebody who has armor and you get into a situation that looks a bit like this. So let me demonstrate what I mean. He went down, they went down, this one ran away, this one went down, and the wizard's on their own, and they're dealing with the ogre because there's nobody else there. This is the time when you would use Shocking Grasp in desperation to try to survive, because unfortunately the ogre has a speed of 40 feet, and you only have a speed of 30 feet, so it's always going to be able to move up to you and attack. Even if you disengaged, and it had 30 feet, it would still be able to move up to you and attack. So you don't want to really be just moving away and provoking an attack of opportunity, because an ogre can do a lot of damage. This is why I don't like it. This is really the only time that Shocking Grasp is useful, is to get out of dodge and pray that you score high enough that you can leave its range without taking an attack. And really, again, it's still only useful if there's somebody who can block and stop them from pursuing you. So therefore, I do not like Shocking Grasp. So let's get rid of the ogre. Let's bring in somebody who has armor, because armor makes a big difference. Again, if you do not have meat shields, not really going to be very useful to you. Okay, let's bring all these ones back, because they were running away, and we don't want them to run away just yet. So I'm going to get rid of this and get rid of that, and we'll ditch this. And I'm not going to put down the armor class of the gnoll because I frankly don't care what it is. The only difference with our attack roll, our damage roll would be almost exactly the same. The damage doesn't change with Shocking Grasp against armor. The only thing that changes is how many dice you get to roll when you make your attack. So I make my attack, I roll 2 dice, I take the highest result. So you increase the chances of being successful. I rolled a 2, whoops, I rolled a 2, and I rolled a 14. So I get to add 14 to the 5. 14 and 5, it's 19. Okay, 19 is a pretty good strike. Chances are you're going to hit your target. Okay, and the only time I would do that is if the gnoll decides to go right through the meat shields and get to you. This is probably the only time when you're too close and there wasn't enough of a barrier between you and the target. So that's probably the only time I would consider using Shocking Grasp. So really useful against armored enemies when basically the wizard has messed up or the party has pretty much been decimated and you're in desperation and you can't afford for them to make an attack of you on your character, even if it's an opportunity attack. But it doesn't solve the problem of them attacking later on. This is why I do not like the spell. I frankly think it is a big waste of your time, unless of course you plan to get into trouble often. If you plan to get into trouble often, maybe it would be a good option. Okay, so that's everything I have to cover for today. If you found this useful, fantastic. I have actually hundreds of videos on Dungeons & Dragons 5e for players and Dungeon Masters. There's a series of videos on spells and how to cast specific spells. You can go and check those out as well if you want to. Bunch of them. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content like this, you can do that through Patreon. The Amazon affiliate links down in the description. You can also use the merchandise shelf and buy some merch if you want, or just watch my videos, that's fine too. Make sure to share, like and subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Don't run away. This is your questions and answers time, so I'm bringing back the webcam. And I will do my best to answer some questions. And a question I will answer because somebody had posted it, but I was not going to present it in this video because I knew that somebody would ask the question of, Fred, what happens when I combined a spell effect? What if two people, what if there's 2 Ray of Frosts targeted on the same creature? Now, you need to look in the player's handbook. When it comes to the same spell effect, you can't have the same spell effect from exactly the same spell cast on a creature. They don't stack, okay? There are odd situations where that might work, but they're very rare, okay? And it would come down to going through every single spell. And frankly, that would just drive me nuts, and I have no intention of doing that. Yes, you can use things like Chill Touch, Ray of Frost in combination to do a whole lot of different things to a monster to sort of control what's going on with them, okay? But they all have very specific times when they're useful. Okay, I need some more water, and then I am going through the chat and doing my best to answer questions. Okay, all right. I'm feeling a little bit better now. Before I was starting to fade. So we're going to chuck some little monsters in here just to keep myself occupied. I mean, yeah, if this happens in your game, it's time to run away. Okay, that's too much. All right, so let's have a look at the chat and see what people have to say. And yes, so moving through here, Osbor, hello Osbor. The audio might be low, but I think you'll find that you can adjust that. The audio might be low simply because I've turned down my microphone quite a bit, but you just turn your microphone up, okay? Wes Taylor says the audio is low. F Hubba is here. Fire Knight is here. Hi, how's it going? Have we got a question yet? Just people saying hi, hi. A question. Fire Knight has a question. Can you help me with my homework? No. Thank you, Fire Knight. Matt, hi Matt, how's it going? Danny Studios. Hello, is having a good laugh? Okay, do we have a real question? Osbor, I think it is. Besides increasing your spell casting stat and leveling up, is there any way to increase the DC of a spell? Okay. That's actually quite a difficult thing to do, to increase the DC of a spell. There are ways of doing it, but frankly, they're so situational that I'm not even going to go into it, because you can't do it easily. What you can do is you can use something like Bless, and the good thing about somebody casting Bless on the group is that it gives you a 4-sided dice, so you get to add a 4-sided dice to your 20-sided dice roll. So every time you make an attack, you get that 4-sided dice. Okay, so that's quite useful, because you get between 1, 2, 3, and 4. It can make all the difference. So that will increase your attack. Okay, that spell, if somebody casts it on you, and you can cast it on about 3 different individuals, and you can increase the number that it will affect based on the level that you cast it at. That's the great thing about it. The other thing that Bless can do is it can allow you to improve your saving throw, but it won't increase the DC of the spell you're casting. So that's one way of seeing it. Okay, so no easy way to do that. That's worth mentioning. All right, what's that? Ingabur, I can't even pronounce that name. Okay, Fred. Yeah, I know Chill Touch can work in the right place, but if you're using a cantrip on your big bads, you're not going to last. You're going to get the group's going to get trounced. Hello, Matt. Have a good laugh there. Another monk dies. Yeah, well, monks do die, but actually, it's actually pretty hard to do that when they get to a certain point. Trust me, I've tried. Okay, so I've got a question. Execute Order 69. Thank you for giving me a question. The release of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is my first introduction to the Artificer class. Oh my god. Could you briefly go over how its spellcasting works? For some reason, I can't seem to wrap my head around it. Okay, so if you're trying to play an Artificer and it's the very first thing that you have ever used in the game, you are asking too much of yourself. Frankly, I'm not going to go over that. It's too complicated, and you won't be able to deal with that. It's too hard. The problem with an Artificer is there's a number of different camps that believe that the Artificer is not that complex compared to any other caster, and other people who believe that it is. And I tend to believe, based on what I've seen and the people that I play with, who've got a better understanding of how to play classes than I do, when they say it's a really super complex class, the Artificer is not the place you want to go to. That would require like its own video to actually demonstrate how to use an Artificer properly. So I don't want to go anywhere near that, okay? I don't even allow Artificers at my table for a lot of different reasons. Okay. But it's 2 or more dice, but only 1 die. No. Okay, so for those of you who are from North America, who use modified English, I'm from New Zealand, so I use Oxford English spoken by a Kiwi or a New Zealander, which is not the same as somebody who would pronounce something from, say, Great Britain using Oxford English. And the modern version of dice, and I've said this to people so many times and I get sick of it, it's usually the North Americans, is the modern version of dice, whether it be 1 dice or 2 dice, there used to be a die version, and then if you had more than 1, dice. The modern dictionary definition is dice can represent 1 or more. Okay, and I'm done. Thank you for your trying to educate me, but you need to look at modern English, because dice versus die doesn't play into modern English anymore. Modern English has actually changed. Okay, Matt, to Too bad D&D does let the sorcerer split the spell. 3 targets sounds fair. Okay. All right. There must be a question in here somewhere. Hi, Christian. How's it going? No, that's not a question. Typos. Mr. Guy call typo? I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on there. Yeah. Half casters, yeah. Okay, so moving on. Having a good laugh there. Do we have any more questions, or are we done for today? That would be, is it lose? Ego? I do apologise if I got your name wrong. Hi, how's it going? Is Ranger stronger in my opinion? If you're saying, is a Ranger stronger in terms of a class in combat? Probably not. But is a Ranger better to have when you're in a wilderness exploration campaign? Frankly, I find the Ranger one of my favourite classes because it's not full of class features that have to do with combat. And the things they can do, they do all the time. They're always on. I actually like them a lot more. I wish some of the other classes were like that. No, you can't cast Shock and Grasp with a bonus action unless you are a sorcerer and you're using meta magic. Okay, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. Gonzo the Great has got something to say about Shock and Grasp. This spell is shocking. I hope Fred can conduct himself. I don't know. I probably can't conduct myself that well when it comes to Shock and Grasp. Hi Tyler, how's it going? I'm glad you love it. Fred Daniels here. Hi, how's it going? We've got a question from Fender. You need to be quick about it because I am going to disappear very quickly once I answer those 2 questions that are right in front of me. Do you use any of the variant rules from the Dungeon Master's Guide? No, actually I don't. I use my own variant rules, but my variant rules are optional for players. So for example, I've done videos, I have a playlist that says variant rules. And I always give the players the option to use flanking rules. And usually they don't want to do that because I have more monsters than they have player characters. And when you have more monsters than the player's characters, the Dungeon Master has the advantage. And I allow them to chop and change, given any battle if they really want to. But they don't know if there's a second wave with my monsters. I might present just one monster and then decide to bring in a second wave. That can create a few problems. So usually they don't decide to use flanking in my game. I use an optional rule with critical hits. So when you're rolling an attack roll, you'll know that a 20 is a critical hit. So you automatically hit the target, but you also get to double your dice. So if we're doing something like Firebolt, where I would only, in your level 1, and you only get to roll a 10-sided dice, what I would tend to do is I would give them the option, you can do one of 2. Okay, you can just use the rules as they are, which means you get to roll 2 of these dice. And I know a lot of people say just double the number, don't roll 2 dice, but players like to roll dice. So you roll 2 dice with a critical, okay, because you normally would be 1. I will say to them, look, you can do it that way, or instead of rolling the dice, you don't have to roll the dice. You can just take the maximum value on this dice that you can get on a single dice, not 2 dice, because that would be more powerful and a bit overpowered. Okay, so that on a 10-sided dice, they get to do 10 damage. They don't have to risk the chance of rolling really low on 2 10-sided dice, because there's nothing worse than rolling 2 dice. Now, rolling big numbers is good, but if you roll really low and you get like a 2, and you get like there's a 1, and you do a critical hit, and all you do is 3 damage, it's a bit of a bummer. Okay, so that's a variant rule I use, and a lot of my variant rules are optional. I have a variant rule that is optional with regard to character death. How do I do character death variant rules? I just say to my player, right, okay, your character died. If you guys have got no way to bring the character back, and you want to keep playing the character, you don't have to roll up a new character. You don't have to make a new character. If you want to keep playing that character, I will allow you to keep playing that character. I will just bring in something to make it a bit more interesting. So your character can still be played. Maybe it's brought back by the gods. Maybe it winds up as a zombie. Maybe you know, the local church or temple will do this favor for you and bring back your character. But now you owe them a favor. I've done this recently in my own campaign, and it works fine for me. So my variant rules are almost always my own creation, and they are optional for players to use. They do not have to use them. Good question though, Fender. Noel, hello, how do you do? Can you explain the way Artificer uses? No, I'm not going to explain any of the Artificer spell stuff. Not a chance. It needs its entire video all by itself. It's because it's too complicated. Half-casters are bad enough as it is. Wizards are hard to work out, but half-casters are even more confusing for people. Okay, Noel has a question. No, I've already said no to that. Not going to do that. Don, hi. Hi, Don. How's it going? Hi, Paul. How's it going, Paul? You have a question, and I need a drink of water before I answer this question, but I will. Sucking that down. All right, if you're going to keep me here, you better ask questions quick before I get to the bottom here. I've got one more to go. Paul's question is, just got here, so if you cover this, what is the rule when a creature of something A is only partially caught in the area of a spell? Okay. So in the past, the clarification used to be that the spell only had to cover half the creature. Okay. So that means if it's caught in the area and it takes up 2 squares, if you're covering 2 of those squares, or it covers 4 squares, and your spell affects 2 or 3 of those squares, then it's affected. If it covers 1 square, it's not affected. But I have noticed that Jeremy Crawford has been doing some different things with the rules. So that used to be, and I know it used to be that case because I had so many questions around that. And he definitely was saying this. And now we have some clarification, which basically says that if any part of the spell is hitting the area that the monster takes up, then the spell is affecting them. So for me, in terms of answering your question, just do it whatever way your Dungeon Master wants to do it. Because frankly, the rules keep modifying and adjusting. They keep calling them errata and clarifications. Frankly, it's just confusing for people. And yeah. So there are actually 2 versions that you could follow. The older version and the newer version. And if you go and have a look at some of the Sage Advice stuff, it actually answers that question in its current form. So if you're using the current form of the rules, it will have it there. But I don't even go into that because it just isn't worth the effort. Half the time it's just a pain, okay? I know that might not necessarily have answered your question the way you wanted, Paul, to find that there are actually 2 answers. But yeah. Okay, so next we have, hi Alex, how's it going? If a fighter action surges, can he cast 2 spells? It's a good question. It's actually in Sage Advice. If you have a fighter that can cast spells and they use action surge, there are specific circumstances where that would work. So I'm going to clear the board and just give you an idea of what's going on here. We'll give you a target, make it the troll, and we'll run down how this would look, because it's almost always confusing to people because of bonus actions. Bonus actions are what really messes it up. If they got rid of bonus actions in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, the whole thing would be so much easier to play, but they haven't. So here's how this works. You have an action, and you also have a bonus action, which I'm going to represent by the 6-sided dice. When you use action surge, that action surge gives you another action, okay? Now, provided you're not playing something like a sorcerer and you're just playing a spellcaster who isn't a sorcerer, who hasn't got access to metamagic, and you are also a fighter using action surge, which is quite a common thing to do in terms of multi-classing. If you cast a spell here, that is a bonus action, okay, a bonus action spell, that means this spell here, this action spell, must be a cantrip, okay? Does that make sense? Must be a cantrip. That means if you use Action Surge, the action that you get from Action Surge also means it would have to be a cantrip. So you would get to cast a bonus action spell, if you have a bonus action spell to use. You can use your action to cast a cantrip. You use Action Surge and you cast another cantrip. That's usually not what people are looking to do, okay? Usually people are looking to use 2 fireballs. That's usually the go-to. So the best way to make sure you can do that without stuffing things up for yourself, since when you cast a bonus action spell you can only cast a cantrip, don't use a bonus action spell. Do not do that, okay? Instead, use your action, and you're using your action to cast Fireball if you have Fireball available, which I'm assuming you would. And then you use your Action Surge to get another action, and you cast Fireball. And you have managed to cast 2 spells that are in action. And you can do that. It is possible. And you can cast them at any level that you like. They could be level 3, 4 spells, depending on what sort of character you built. Okay? That's my suggestion to you. Do not use the bonus action spell. Okay? You can use the bonus action to do anything but cast a spell if you're trying to use your Action Surge and your normal action to cast big level spells. That's what you want to do. Okay? Does that make sense? Hopefully I have answered that and it's abundantly clear. Otherwise it's going to be interesting later on when we get to dealing with this later. One of the things I would also like to point out that I think people forget is that if you are a sorcerer and you're multi-classing, you have access to something like Action Surge, Metamagic makes all the difference. But you can't trick your Dungeon Master by doing this sort of thing. I'm going to use my action to cast Fireball. And then I'm going to use Action Surge to cast another Fireball. Now that I've cast my 2 Fireballs, I'm now going to tell my Dungeon Master I want to use my bonus action to use Misty Step. That isn't going to work. Just changing the order that you do things does not make it possible. Okay? So don't think that will fly. That will just cause trouble at your table and you'll annoy people. Okay? So don't do that sort of thing. Hopefully, Alex, I answered your question. I know where you were coming from because I've had lots of players use that particular combination many times. And had plenty of arguments with them as well. Okay. X-Tech. Hopefully I got your name correct. Hello, how's it going? He's got his 2 cents. Yeah, like I said, there are 2 answers to area effect spells. Okay, Fendar's got a question. Thanks for the answer, Fred. You're welcome. What are the aspects you don't like about the Artificer? The Artificer is able to make magic items. The Artificer is really a class that should be only available in Eberron or in somebody's homebrew world where that sort of thing is normal. The Artificer is hugely complicated, and there are aspects to the Artificer, although Trent Monk would say that the Artificer is one of the worst classes out there. There are aspects to the Artificer which I find just stupidly broken. And I know it will cause untold strife and arguments at my table. Hence, I don't allow the Artificer at my table. If I was running an Eberron campaign, I would absolutely allow the Artificer. But that's a different type of play world. That's not the kind of campaign world I want. I don't really want the Artificer injected into every Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting. But this is the normal thing. For those of you who haven't worked out, Tasha's Cauldron to Everything is full of very, very good subclasses and a bunch of rules that are supposed to keep Dungeons & Dragons 5e going on for years, because it's essentially Dungeons & Dragons 5.5. Okay, I know people would disagree with me. It's a bestseller. I knew it would sell out. I knew it would do really well, and it has. But it is 5.5. So expect down the track in, I don't know, 6 months, a year, or 2 years, that there will be a release of a Player's Handbook 5.5. Because they did this with 3.5. Wizards of the Coast did it with version 3. They did it with 4e. They brought out the essentials. You had the basic Dungeons & Dragons 4e rules, and then they brought out an essentials rule, which was simplified. And it was intended to be played by younger audiences or younger people and extend the life of Dungeons & Dragons 4e. The same thing is happening with Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Okay? I know people don't believe me, but it is definitely going to happen. And you don't need to believe me, because I'll be right in about 6 to 12 months anyway. Okay. What do you got to say here? No, there are no more questions. As far as I can tell, I think Fred is just talking about the Artificer. And that's it. So we have covered everything. And I almost lost my voice, but I haven't, which is good news. Now, for those of you who are wondering what is likely to happen in the future in terms of tutorials, they will continue. I have been asked to explain and demonstrate wall spells, so Firewall and Wall of Force, because you can shape those walls into different sort of positions and move them around. It's really hard to sort of explain something like that. It's easier to demonstrate it with a battle map and grid and miniatures and probably even dice to actually do something like that. I'm hoping I can do that in about 2 weeks. Next week, the video is going to be more around Dungeon Masters, and it'll be the Curse of Strahd. I will be covering shells. I don't know that everybody knows what shells are, so I won't say anything else because there's a lot of players here. And yeah, so that's what you can probably expect next week. There are a whole lot of videos slated for release. So a video with me and Wally DM talking about Wandering Monsters. There's a video from me and Bob World Builder on the Dragon of Ice by a Peak. You should get one on my channel and his channel. You should also see some stuff from Matthew Perkins, who is doing a fabulous series on the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and I have one more video to release that we made as well from him, and you'll see that fairly shortly in the next couple of weeks, with any luck, with everything going well. And also D&D Homebrew, Kevin. Me and Kevin sat down and smashed around at cursed magic items. I believe we talked about cursed magic items and non-player characters traveling in the party. And so those are all topics that have more broad range that I think people will find interesting. And I will be hopefully doing some more product reviews as well. Most of them are books, so it takes a long time. I find that's the biggest issue I have is just time, because reading books takes time. To actually do it properly, if I wanted to do it haphazardly, I could, but I'm not going to do that. That seems kind of unfair to you guys, so I don't want to do that sort of thing. Okay, so wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the night, the afternoon, or the early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.